A very good afternoon, everybody. And today, in this novel, we already had introductory presentation on this by students. They made a very good presentation on the only story. So we came to know about characters, themes, storyline also is being discussed. But again, we will have a recap, or we'll try to look again at the story and the characters here. So today we will try to see characters in this novel. Along with the character, we'll study summary of the novel, and with that we will see the timeline of the narration. As we know, Julian Barnes is a kind of a novelist who would not tell a straightforward story, moving in a chronological sequence. So there will be lots of jumping in time from where it begins, and then there is a kind of a flashback, and then again you come in the present moment, then again somewhere in between you go in the story, again you come back, and then again you travel back there. So such kind of important three jumps are taken in the narration, going into flashback before and while he is contemplating, that is our protagonist, while he is contemplating, he is in present moment. But when he tells us a kind of a story from his life, he goes into flashback and tells us that. So that is how it is used. Narrative pattern also is quite interesting. So in a very interesting way, there is narration of first person, second person, and third person. So all these things are merged together in this narrative. Again, something very rare that people would do. Normally people prefer first person narration, then the story will continue only in the first person, or second or the third, but a kind of a mixture of all those things again makes it very interesting to study the narrative pattern and how this is connected with the theme, or how can we connect with the character study or the thematic study, that also we can see here. So let us see this, and the beginning part we will read also how the novel begins there. Okay, characters. Okay, so we will take help of students' presentation to see how the characters are being discussed here. Our okay, so in the slides, this is the group task by the students. Okay, and the students prepared this slides, quite well prepared material on this novel, which we find it very difficult to get lots of material on this text. So author's introduction we already have discussed, so right now we are not talking about author here. Okay? Other works also we have discussed in our last class, so we are not now looking at this. Okay? So this text titled The Only Story novel, memory novel, yes, it is quite rightfully put into the category of memory novel. So which obviously will become a thematic concern also, that how or what is memory novel and what points are important to study memory novel. Okay? Very recently published in 2018, setting is around London. Okay? 1960s is what it begins, and it comes down up till contemporary time. Okay? So 60s up till down the line to the time in which we live, almost, that is touched upon. The narrator, our protagonist, first person narrator is Paul Roberts. Yeah? Paul Roberts, I think. Yeah? Not Robert Paul, but let us verify with the text. Paul Roberts is the full name. So Roberts is the last name. Paul Roberts. So that correction you have to do in your slides also before you upload on this. Okay? Paul Roberts. So Roberts stands for the last name and Paul is the first name, who is our protagonist. Okay, so narrator is, let me also correct here, Paul Roberts. Okay. Okay, fine. Characters. Okay. So quite well, the characters and this also this animated figures are also selected quite well. Obviously, some are quite very going on well with the characters. Some like this also, Paul Roberts will have to see whether this is exactly this when the story is told or not. But a young Paul is there, and the Paul that we face is a rather old fellow when the story is told to us there. Okay? Suzanne MacLeod, Mr. Gordon MacLeod, Martha, Clara, John, Annie, Eric, and there are other minor characters also there. This is the chart of the characters, and these are a few minor characters there. Okay, so let us see these characters here. So our story is told by Paul Roberts. Paul Roberts is the one who tells us the story. And when he tells us the story, he is of what age he might be? Well, he's telling us the story. Let us draw a timeline also along with this here, so we can put that also together. Okay, okay, timeline, character, and the storyline. Okay. So we may find that Paul, who is telling us this story, it is around, we can say 69, 70 years old. The age of Paul Roberts when we are introduced, and he is the narrator. Whenever the first person is there, it is he who is telling us the story, and he is an old fellow. So we are, as such, we are in the memory of an old man. Yeah? What we have is, in this novel, a memory of an old man. Yeah? And the only story, the story that he is telling us is obviously about love. It's a love story, but told by whom? By an old man of around 70 years. So obviously we get an idea that this must not be a very romantic love story. It won't be a romantic love story. It will be a kind of a love story which will be having lots of thinking, lots of philosophy about life and love and suffering, and that is expected because who is telling us a story? If he is some young person, then obviously he will romanticize love. He will glamorize love. Whereas here, the very glamour of the love is shredded apart. The glamour around the love is shredded apart. And we get a realistic way of looking at love in terms of responsibility. More of a responsibility than only of a kind of the love that normally people romanticize in much younger days. So it is not about the young people's love, but a story has a reflection upon younger days when the protagonist has undergone a love affair, a love relation with a rather old woman, and the way he now looks at that love is not something a kind of a happy memory. Now it is not a kind of a happy memory. So this love is not about a happy memory. It is not this, but it has some kinds of philosophical thinking around the responsibility there. So Paul Roberts around this time is starting us to tell a story here, and very quickly he takes us into the journey of a story by telling that everybody has stories in their life. So many stories we all have in our life. And sometimes we may say that, well, but one story is very important. Among many stories that I have in my life, one story is very important. That one, the only one story or the only story is something very significant. And well, traditional literature, whenever you talk about the only story or the thing, it will be about love. And people will say that the first love is something that people never forget. First love is something that people remember forever. And there is lots of literature written on this first love or the love, and that becomes the only story in so many's life. So he says that in my life also there is that only story. And let me tell about my love story, my only story there. And says it all began around 50 years back. It all began before 50 years. So we go in timeline and we say that from here we go 50 years back. Yeah, 50 years back. So that is when he was 19 years old. When Paul is of 19 years, he is studying in university. It is there that we come to know that this must be the age when he started telling us the story. So Paul is 19 years of age when the story, he begins the story, going back into his memory, 50 years back, he tells us. And he tells the story of his love with Suzanne MacLeod. Yeah? Suzanne MacLeod, that is the character. It is M-A-C. Okay? MacLeod, Suzanne MacLeod, and she is of 48 years. Yeah, at that time. So she is 48 years of age, and she already had two daughters. That is Clara and Martha. Yes, Clara and Martha, two daughters, and even the husband is still alive. And the husband is Gordon MacLeod. Okay. The husband, yes, and two daughters. Now, even these daughters are older than Paul. So it's a very obscure relation wherein Julian Barnes is taking us a kind of a love story, but of Paul with a rather old lady, Suzanne, who already had two daughters also, who are older than Paul, and that it takes there. Now, when we enter into this story, and there are some reflections in the beginning, and we are aware about something about Julian Barnes, that what kind of stories he normally tell. Obviously, it is not that kind of sensationalism of popular literature. It is not so. It is normally philosophical. But well, even when in that case, when we enter into this, there is always in the back of the mind another novel of Julian Barnes, and that is The Sense of an Ending. The another novel, that is The Sense of an Ending, which always hovers around whenever we look at this novel. And if you will see any of the videos of the book review, any of the videos of book review, you will see almost everybody will speak something about the sense of an ending. Everybody will refer to this novel also, which got Man Booker Prize in 2011. So people will speak about this novel a lot. And even if people will not speak, somebody will ask a question that why have you not referred to this novel? So that is a very interesting connection of this novel with this novel. It is almost similar to what we have done in Amitav Ghosh's novel. We have said that this novel, to understand this, you have to go back. And you have to see 2004 when he wrote The Hungry Tide. Then you have to refer to Calcutta Chromosome. So you understand that post-colonial way of looking at the thing that he is doing in that. And his Ibis trilogy, Sea of Poppies and other things also. So all those stories are coming in Gun Island. And some of the characters from The Hungry Tide are very much present as such. So the relations have grown in The Hungry Tide. That is 15 years back, and then now they are developing in a further way, those stories. So even in that, there is that connection with the previous text that is necessary there. So here also, this is necessary. So when even we remember this or other story, we find that, well, if there is a story of a Paul who tells that he had a relation or love relation or the kind of an intimacy with Suzanne MacLeod, who already had 2 grown-up daughters, then people might think that, well, Paul will also develop relations with either one of the daughters also. And then there will be that complexity that is arising, that Paul had a relation with mother as well as with daughter. Now, some of you might think, well, this is a kind of a cheap web series which talk about these stories. Cheap web series will be making such stories. You can't imagine Julian Barnes telling such stories that there is an affair with mother and then with daughters also, and then there is a curious kind of a triangle. We might have seen triangle of 2 sisters loving the same fellow, like this new Akshara and kind of a thing that is going on in soap operas. A very common plot for decades we are seeing those kinds of a thing. That 2 sisters and one, that is fine. We can digest that plot. But a mother and a daughter having a rivalry in a relation with somebody is something we can say that it must be a cheap web series, a B grade Bhojpuri film or something like that you may think of. Well, but in Sense of an Ending, there already has that kind of a plot. There was already that kind of a plot in The Sense of an Ending. So there is a character, Adrien. Adrien Finn is a character and he is in love with Veronica. And then ultimately we come to know that he had a relation with Veronica's mother. And Veronica's mother, Sarah Ford, gave birth to a child also. And that child is now taken care by Veronica. So there is already a character who was having an affair with daughter. Ultimately that affair fell apart, and what continued is with mother. And then mother also gave birth to a child also. Now that child, which is given birth at a much later age by a rather old lady like Suzanne MacLeod in 40s, late 40s. So the child is little bit abnormal. The child is not healthy mentally and it has to be taken care of. And now it is Veronica who is taking care of that. Who was supposed to be her son is now her brother. So that is the story, the sense of an ending. So it is already, so you start sensing that will this story also move in that direction or not. When we read a literature which, about what we don't know the summary, then there is always that possibility to keep on constructing story as we read. As we read, in the back of the mind, we keep on constructing the story that this will happen, that will happen, what will happen, it will go in this direction, that direction. So when we take an overnight break from reading of a novel, because we can't read it overnight, we have to take breaks, and then we keep on thinking that what will happen to these characters, in which direction they will be drifted. So that we keep on thinking, and then we are making stories in our mind. It will go in this or another direction. Well, but in this story, nothing of that is happening. In this story, nothing of those things are happening. There, as a fan fiction, if you want to write, you can develop a story in either of the direction also. There is a possibility of going there, but that is not happening here. Perhaps this relation between Paul and Suzanne is taken from the sense of an ending. Because in that novel, we don't know what actually happened between, let me write those characters here, Adrien Finn and Sarah Ford. Yes. So what actually happened between Sarah Ford and Adrian Finn? We don't know, because again you are in a memory of one protagonist. You are in the memory, so you only know one side of a story only. Like here also, we know the story of Paul Roberts, but we don't know the story of what is happening with other characters. What other characters are thinking, that we absolutely don't know anything about. Nothing we are aware about. So that is the problem of memory narration, or that is the beauty of memory novels, that you are only aware about one side of a story. Other things you have to just imagine. So Adrian Finn, and that happens, which is revealed as a kind of a suspense in a novel. But what might have happened, that, and people were shocked or surprised, how is it possible that a young fellow might have a relation with a rather old woman, who is in a way of older age than the daughter also. Daughter is almost parallel or older than the young fellow. So maybe that episode is coming here. Here it is unfolding in this way. And what kind of relation it might develop into, what might happen. So this relation is not only about physicality only. So it is not only about the physical relation which Paul might be thinking in his early years, when he is 19, 20, 21, in the first decade when he had a relation. He might be thinking about more of the physical relation, and he keeps on pondering about that. But it is not about that. It is more about understanding human being and developing a sense of responsibility for other people. That is not happening. So when we think of Suzanne McLeod, that what kind of woman is she? What might be going in her mind? Why would she, after being married to somebody, is still lacking something that is attracted towards a young fellow? And then what goes there? That is she satisfied with that relation, or the hunger that drive her towards the other relation still remains as it is only? That is also the study of Suzanne McLeod's. We very sympathetically look at Suzanne McLeod, that her condition is very terrible, though we don't know anything about what is going on in the mind of Suzanne McLeod. We only come to know that she becomes drunkard and then suffers from dementia, forgetfulness, almost a psychological peasant. That is how she ends her life, or she dies almost in a similar condition. But then her untold story of Suzanne is a very tragic story. The very tragic story, as in this novel we had Veronica, whose life was having the similar kind of tragedy, which is not told, but we have to imagine when we read the memory here. So we are taken into this from of 19 years earlier, and the relationship develops in a very interesting way. There is the phenomena of sports also playing a vital role here. We might see in different contexts that the male and the female protagonist might come together, different things. Now, if you just imagine and try to think that whichever literature you have studied so far, or films that you have seen, how would first time two lovers meet each other? How would first time the two lovers would meet each other? In what condition they come together, and then what happens? Well, here the case is that there is a tennis club, and Paul has been there, so parents are expecting that you also go and play tennis match. And because the club is a place where the people from upper class normally come, rich upper class people would be a part of that. There is that class conflict is also something that Julian Barnes is always conscious about, the class conflict in the Western societies or in England. He is very conscious about that also. The parents would expect, who are middle class or lower middle class people, Roberts, and they would say that you better be a part, so you also can get a good companion who you can marry later on and live happily with that. So that is how the parents are looking at tennis club as something to have a relation with a better family, a relation with a better family so far as class is concerned. That is what it tries to see there. And let me see, the recording is going on well. Okay. So he is tall. He is not willing to go. He is not very much interested or willing to go and be part of this tennis club, and not much interested in those things. But then, well, as it is told, he goes there, he plays, and there is a tournament coming up in there, and there were various kinds of matches, and there were mixed doubles matches also. So luckily, the draw has given Paul and Suzanne as partners. They became a partner in a mixed doubles match also. Well, we can say that, well, fate also had designed something for them, or destiny also had planned. So this dice are rolled out by destiny. Dice is rolled out by destiny, that you become a partner in a match, mixed doubles, and that gives the beginning of a relation, which has to end in some kind of tragedy. But what is the role of a destiny? Julian Barnes do not believe in such destinies. He is in a way an atheist. So he don't think that there is somebody who would be playing with us and we are Katputlis, and then he would make our life, he'll write our destiny like Vidhata or other kinds of things. He is not a believer into that. But if you want to read it that way, it is possible. Amitav Ghosh would love to read it in that way also, would like to connect everything in a similar way, but Julian Barnes would not connect in that way. Even if there are any slight chance of reading those things in that way, he will counter argue and give more reasoned or rational explanation of that also. He would give that also. So in this story, Sense of an Ending, when a child is born out of that relation, which are not in a way a proper relations between Adrian Finn and Sarah Ford, young fellow and an old lady, that is the mother of a girlfriend, then that child is born with mental deformities. And so Veronica, who was before Adrian Finn, a girlfriend of our protagonist, who is Webster, who is Tony Webster, who is telling us this story, and Tony Webster was in love with Sarah Ford's daughter Veronica, but then Veronica found Adrian Finn better than Tony Webster. So there is a breakup between Tony Webster and Veronica, and that relation goes in this direction. At that time, Tony was very angry, and he wrote a letter to both of them that I give you this thing, that if there is something like prophecy, and if my words become true, then let there be acid rain on both of you, and let your child be punished for this. As if some sadhu is taking a water in the hand and says કે તમને અભિશાપ આપું છું. એ રીતે ટોનીએ પત્ર લખેલો. And then the letters written in that letter, words written in that letter becomes true. Becomes true, and really that happens, that they have a child, but it is not Veronica and Adrian, but it is rather Adrian and Veronica's mother. They have a child who is mentally. So when he faces that situation, he is already old now. That anger was in a younger days. But when you face that reality, you are very old. You have almost forgotten those things, and you regret a lot. He says regret is a lesser word. Remorse is something more there. In this novel also, we find the same thing. We'll call it regret or remorse. And he says this is the remorse. Remorse is something where there is no way of turning back. In regret, you can go and tell somebody, I am sorry, forgive me, I am sorry. But remorse is something where that person is not left to whom you have to tell sorry. એ વ્યક્તિ જ ન રહે તો, એ મૃત્યુ પામે તો પછી તમારે રિમોર્સ સાથે જ જીવવું પડે કે હવે સોરી પણ કોને કહેવા જાઓ. So you can't tell that. Also, that is a very deep remorse, that you have to live with that fact that you are a very ugly person. You are a very hideous, terrible person. You have destroyed somebody's lives, and you have already forgotten that also. And you have already forgotten that, and you are living happily. Old age, you are living happily now after destroying. So that realization comes at much later stage. So that is where, now this means that, well, is there a destiny? Is there a power of words? શું આ શબ્દો કોઈ એવી તાકાતથી અંદરથી બોલાયા હશે કે સાચા પડ્યા છે? શું આ રીતે કોઈ એવી તાકાતથી કે ખરેખર સિન્સિયરિટીથી બોલાતા શબ્દો, એ સિન્સિયરિટી ગુસ્સાની હોય કે પ્રેમની હોય, એ સાચી પડે? કોઈ મિથમાં જાય તો કહેશે કે પડે. Some myth will tell yes, but Julian Barnes will tell no. So he will justify that the child is deformed not because of Abhishap of Tony Webster, but because of old age of Sarah Ford, because of much rather middle age of Sarah Ford, and it is possible that people might have miscarriage, or the children are born with some kind of deformity at a much older age also. So that is what he is writing actually. So that says that, well, he is not for mystifying the things, but rather he wants to demystify anything that happens in life also. That is the kind of a writer that is Julian Barnes. In Gun Island, we have seen that Amitav Ghosh is trying to mystify something that is more rational. So he gives the conflict between the mystical aspect and the rational scientific explanation also there. So they become a part. By chance they become a partner in a doubles match. They play a couple of matches, they win, and then they are defeated in some quarterfinals or the things also. But then that gave a chance for them to stay together for a while and to move on also. So you go home to pick up somebody, then you go to drop somebody, and in that way Suzanne and Paul, they come near each other. And then that relation developed more often, and they had a physical relation with each other, and they became more intimate also, even though Suzanne was with husband and 2 daughters. Even with that also, still Paul developed the relations with them. The parents of Paul's were very unhappy with the kind of a thing that people are talking about. In a small town, it's like a village. In 60s, suburbs of London in 60s are much like a village, another thing there. So that all happens when he is of the age 19, and these relations almost continue up till he is of 29-30 years. So almost a decade the relations are going. These relations are of around a decade that it goes on there between both of them. They also, from that suburban area, they move on to the outskirts of London. They rent a room. They started staying together also, Suzanne and Paul. Paul would insist many times for a divorce with Gordon MacLeod, so they can be more free, but Suzanne was not happy with the divorce. And now that side of why Suzanne is doing all this thing, why not doing these things, we are not aware about. We are not aware. We just have to imagine that what might be there, because we are in the memory of Paul. So we get one side of things only, and whatever he thinks about other people and himself, there are more chances that he is telling many lies than truths. It seems that he is a liar or he is telling many lies rather than truth that is telling to us as a story. So we can't believe anything that Paul is telling us. Now we are reading a novel where there is a story unfolding. There is somebody who is telling us a story, and we are not supposed to believe into that person's story also. So what are we supposed to do then? That is that complexity of this postmodern narration, that you read a story somebody is telling, and then you have to keep on doubting that whatever is telling might be wrong, or something will turn out later on where what he has told us might not be correct also. So there might be something else altogether. So when we know Julian Barnes or this postmodern technique, we wait for the last part to see how all these things are revisited. When things are revisited, what happens? In other novels by Julian Barnes, we get a very interesting shock, surprise at the end, but that is not happening here. So many critics also are unhappy with the only story. They are unhappy because they expected something at the end, but it is not happening in that way. It rather flows in a similar flow. It is not coming as a kind of a shocker to the way it came in the sense of an ending in the last pages there. But well, for almost these years they stay together, they move there and this, and then during this time we come to know that Suzanne develops the habit of drinking too much, and not only drinking, telling lies also, telling lies. So she will not tell Paul or other people that she had a habit of drinking, but she would hide liquor bottles so that later on when there is nobody, she can pick up a liquor bottle and drink. So not only drinking habit, but also lying. That is that concern that he is initially asking, that who is a better liar, an alcoholist or a lover? Who is a better liar? કોણ વધુ સારું ખોટું બોલે, દારૂડિયો કે પ્રેમી? પછી કે બે જો ભેગા થયા તો ખતરનાક, પછી એનું તો જૂઠ એવું હોય. So the point is towards Suzanne that she is drunkard also and a liar also, and he thinks she is a lover also, but we don't know whether she was really a lover also or not. But she was alcoholist, as well as she was also telling lies also, and that those things are going on. And Suzanne's behavior is unpredictable, unreadable in different way, the way she behaves. She is in a way, professionally, she is nothing. Suzanne McLeod is just a homemaker. So Gordon was the earner of the bread, and she was just the homemaker, and quite a wealthy family. So there is not much thing to be done in the home as such also. Now, when she lives with Paul also, she has nothing to do. Paul has to study. Then from one study to another, he goes for law, and then in search of job also, and to make a career also. But on the other hand, by this time, 48 years, so we have around, we can say 59, 60 years of Suzanne McLeod grows into this age, and she has nothing to do. So she is almost at the home, there only, and Paul will be going out, and those were the days of landline phones. So somebody might call and she might have to reply the call, and sometimes the call might come from some girlfriend of Paul also, and lots of problem might have happened, which is not told to us, because of which with the another character the relations are spoiled in different way also. But this is how they live, the life that goes on. Sometimes why we keep on insisting that now women also should work. એટલે કે કામ હોય તો આ બધા રવાડે ઓછા ચડી, આપણે કામમાં રોકાયેલા રહીએ કે કામ છે, કરિયર છે, એમાં આપણે ક્યાંક આગળ વધવું છે. એ કઈ ન હોય પછી શું કરે? Then perhaps they may try something like Suzanne in different capacity also. So when people work, we'll come to that point also of desire, Lacan, he says, when we talk about love and those things also. At that time we will connect this point again, though Julian Barnes is not talking about that. It is expected that Julian Barnes might have brought those ideas, because he is talking philosophically about love, and what Lacan had said about desire and love, he might have brought in this novel, which might have given a good interpretation. But we will, in our analysis of love, we will try to connect that also. So this is the decade. They have a relation with each other, this a decade, and the life is going on there. Now coming down to this time, around this time, Paul suddenly thinks that I will have to make my career, so I have to live, I have to go abroad, and so calls Clara and Martha, and I think Martha is getting ready to take care of mother. Now, who already is in 60s and having a very terrible drinking habit, and also getting fits of dementia, already now needed to be hospitalized, or the behavior is out of control and she requires to be hospitalized. But Paul now says that Paul is now not able to take care of her. Though he is not telling us that he is running away because he is not able to take care of, he tells us about his career. He has to go out for this work and that work to different countries. He has to move on. That is what he tells us. The story behind the thing, which is not told to us, and Paul is a liar also, and we have to be very careful in believing into what Paul tells us. So we make our own story also, that now he don't want to take the responsibility of this old woman who is now suffering from a psychological illness and this terrible habits of alcoholism or any kind of what we call it, addiction is a psychological disease, addiction, and you have to very carefully deal with addicted people, be it tobacco or drugs or alcoholism. You can't stop it overnight, because body cycle has matched its movement with the drugs. And if the drugs are suddenly stopped, be it tobacco or any of this or alcohol, then the body will very violently react and will damage itself and mind also in different way. So you have to very carefully deal with addicted people, and lots of care and consideration is required. Constantly you have to be with those people. And with alcoholism, if you are going into dementia and different kinds of psychological illness, then constant love is what they demand for. Constant attention they want, constant love. They would be very violent, but you can't be violent with them, with very care and consideration. Now that is where perhaps the love has to play a vital role now. Now the love has to play a vital role of responsibility to taking care of those things. There was a very interesting film, Sadma. Sadma was a film where Kamal Hassan and Sri Devi, they were the actors, and then there were some remakes also of similar kind of films there. There is that kind of story, that how a female protagonist is going into this kinds of feats and psychological problem. The male protagonist takes care ultimately of everything. The tragedy of that story was in a different way, that when the female protagonist becomes okay, she has forgotten the male who has taken care of. So there is a tragedy for the male part, that the one who has taken ultimate care of the women. Now the women, when she became normal, she has forgotten who was the caretaker, and that is the tragedy. And here is a different. Here it is not a male. Now the male, that is our protagonist Paul Roberts, wants to go for personal career, and then he moves on. And while he is moving on, he obviously tells us a story that he had many women coming in the life and had so many multiple affairs with all those kinds of things. Life moved on. It went on in that way. So almost he has like forgotten Suzanne, that what is going on with Suzanne, and what is the condition of Martha, Clara. Martha was taking care of the mother during those years there. And then we jump down to the time which is around 15-20 years before this time that we are in the narration, before 15-20 years. So this was before 50 years, and then we have here another episode before 15 to 20 years of time. And this is the time, so we can say what might be the age of Paul at that time, before 15-20 years. So around 55 to 60 years, not 55 to 60, 45 to 50. Okay? So he is around 70 when he is telling us a story. First flashback he takes us that 50 years before it all began. That is what he tells, and 10 years that affair continued up to here. In 30s he went abroad and left, and then he says 15-20 years back in the last part. This part thing comes in the third part, that before 15-20 years, last time he happened to meet Suzanne. Last time when he met Suzanne. So he might be around 45-50 years. And what might be the age of Suzanne then? You add 20 years, so you can 79-80. Yeah? That is Suzanne's age, might be there. So from 1920 he turns 70 or 50 here, 30 years, and from almost 50 to 80. That is the age. So this is the last meeting between Paul and Suzanne there in the last part that we see. So that last meeting is very tragic also in the last part, the way it happens, and that the story ends with this. And Suzanne has gone almost mad. It is like zombied, almost zombied kind of a being in that psychological asylum, and that place where she is now hospitalized is for the worst kind of people, the worst kind of people for whom it is not possible to come back to normal life from alcoholism or from mental illness in such a kind of a condition, and they are also not kept very well in those conditions also. So she is living such a kind of a terrible life, and Martha told Paul that you at least once visit and see what is the condition of Suzanne. So well, now something that is not told to us, which maybe the daughters also wanted to tell to Paul, that see what you have done with our mother. See what you have done with our mother, and now you are completely forgetful of that and living your own life. And we have to carry this burden of what you have done. But Paul is not telling us that. Paul is not telling us that. He rather takes his side and his defense, and he keeps on telling that, well, I am good, what can I do? I did my best, I tried this, I tried that, all those things he tells there. He also comes to that point in that point that what is it to be courageous and what is it to be cowardice. હિંમત એટલે શું કહેવાય અને ડરપોકપણું એટલે શું કહેવાય. And then he would say that, well, હિંમત એટલે કોઈની સાથે ઊભું રહેવું સમય આવે ત્યારે, અને ડરપોકપણું એટલે ભાગી જવું. જ્યારે તમારી જરૂર છે કોઈને ત્યારે તમે ઊભા ન રહો સાથે, એને cowardice કહેવાય. And he thinks later on that he is coward. He looks at the ugly side of himself, that he is not. So there were occasions in the life when he might have stood for friends, for other people, but then he ran away. And he remembers that with Eric something happened when they were coming back at night, and some people attacked them. Some other people attacked, and then Eric was attacked by these people, and he said, I ran away. And while running away, I kept on shouting that, here is police, I am going to call police. And I know that there were no police. He said, I knew that there were no police, but I was just running away. And then when I came back, Eric was bleeding, and then I excused that I went to get the help for you. But he says it was not help, it was running away. So I was coward. Second time when Gordon is a very, very violent person also. Obviously, you can't expect Gordon to be a good with Paul. Paul is having an affair with Gordon's wife. And you can't say that Gordon can be friendly with Paul. But then he would beat Suzanne also. So there is a kind of a domestic violence that is going on also. And he had couple of times physically attacked Paul also. On one of the occasions when he is attacking, he is running away. Paul says, I ran away instead of facing Gordon also. So if I really loved Suzanne, I might have faced Gordon or anything that comes there, but I was a coward. So I used to run away from, and that is what perhaps Martha also wants to say, that when the time came for responsibility, you are running away. You won't be able to face Suzanne the way she is living a life now. And then he makes his mind that, well, let me go. I don't want to die with that coward kind of an idea. Let me face it. And then he comes to meet or visit Suzanne, and Suzanne is in a very terrible thing. She is not in consciousness. He wants to talk last time as if that scene is something like, he wants to tell that you open your eyes and you scold me, you beat me, you abuse me, do whatever you want to do. But you get empty. You get empty. You might have lots of grudges against me. So empty yourself. Now that perhaps gives us an idea that Paul might have done lots of wrong things which are not told to us. But then his relation or his running away from the relation might have very terrible. He might be aware about it, but we are not told many of. That is why we think that whatever Paul has told might have many lies inside also. Many things might be a kind of a lie there. So here is that meeting, last meeting. And maybe around that time, perhaps Suzanne dies also. He might have died at the age of around this age, when she might have died in the last part also. So this is how this story is moving, and this is a kind of a rough timeline of, we are told a story by a 70-year-old Paul, and he is taking back into his younger days when he was 19 years of age. That is a jump of 50 years back, and that story with breakups in between continues for 10 years, but not in a straight manner, with ups and downs, coming into present, going back, and up till here when they start living in London. And then Suzanne is developing the alcoholic habit and dementia, and there is a breakup here. At this age, when he's 30, he's around 60, there is a breakup between both of them. And Suzanne is to be hospitalized in the initial part of dementia, that thing. And then he has moved on abroad, and he built his career, and he did many different things. And ultimately, he had a partnership into one cheese making company, and he is a co-partner, co-manager of a cheese making company, where he comes back again to the same region, London, around that. And again, Martha is contacting him, and he tells that, well, 15-20 years back, last time, the meeting with Suzanne. So we are given another jump here from this narrator of 70 years old when he was around 45-50, and then it was the last meeting with Suzanne that comes there. So this is the timeline, important characters, and even the plot summary also. Any questions if you have around this? Anybody? Any questions or anything around this part of timeline, summary, and characters? Okay, so this is the Eric which we talked about, his friend who is referred a couple of times. Otherwise, normally the story is between Paul and Suzanne McLeod. And when we study Suzanne's character is the one who has been, who has suffered a lot in her life, and her behavior, normally when people study such characters, Suzanne McLeod, and similar was with Veronica also in the sense of an ending, that she had a problem with having physical relation with husband. So it seems like with Gordon, she is not, they have a separate bedroom perhaps, or the relations are not going well. And as a young person, Paul thought that she might be like lacking physical relation, as the young people would always think of man-women relations in terms of bodily pleasure or the sexual life only. And so they develop the relation, but things are not going well. And because later on Paul remembers that, I don't remember any vivid thing about their physical relations. It is almost forgotten, as if it was not there at all. So we may sense something like he talks about the sexual life, but whether it was actually there or not, it might be a kind of he used a very interesting word also here, that you go into the memory and you construct something around that, which is not actually happening also. So you might be doing that also. Or whatever kind of life, physical relations there might be, it might not be happy one. It might not be happy. So Suzanne McLeod might have some problem having physical relations with the other man, which might be one of the reasons for sexual abuse from Gordon McLeod also. And maybe the way things go with Paul also are not happy in that term also. Now, what may be the reason for that? One of the reasons that people have seen that people who fail to have a better physical relations later on is that they might have undergone child abuse. Child abuse. A very interesting film was even recently one, that was Highway. Highway, have you seen? Anybody has seen? Yes, Highway. So you have the female protagonist who is very oddly behaving. There is a marriage, but well, she is not happy with the marriage. She wants to run away. Now, why would anybody would like to run away from marriage? Because you always see a physical relation after marriage, and you are running from that. Now, what is the reason? That is the childhood abuse, and she also was abused by one of the uncles. And this kind of child abuses are normally by some of the family members, which is proven fact in Indian society also. Another thing also, so some family members in the childhood might have abused, and the child, even Kahani 2 also was about that. Yes, Kahani 2 also was about the same story. And then the children are not able to tell that to anybody, because children do not have a language, that what is this. So nowadays, obviously, people are taught in the school what is good touch and what is bad touch. Or they are told that whenever anybody else is touching your body, you have to be very careful. You don't have to allow them. You have to complain to your teachers or your parents that somebody was touching. It may be a driver of the vehicle in which you travel, or a peon, or any teacher, or any relative, anybody is that. So there are the bad touches which are now taught to children in schools and other things also. Now that is, we are giving language. Otherwise, children do not have that language. How? And when they tell something about the family members, parents will not believe into that. because they see those uncles or mamas or kakas or faibas in a different way. They are a part of a family, so they can't even imagine that these people might be doing something wrong with that. So we get a reference through this character, Uncle Humphrey, I think is the full name. Through that we come to know about this. Let us see in this part, because that is very important to understand the behavior of Uncle Humph. Yeah. So I says that I don't know you played bridge. I don't. That's not the point, Paul. And then all those people who did bad things to you, seeing them again. I leave a pause. She fills it. I had an uncle, Uncle Humph. For Humphrey, I used to go and stay with him and Aunt Florence. After my mother died, so I would have been 11, 12. My aunt would put me to bed and tuck me in and kiss me and put out the light. And just as I would be getting off to sleep, there was a sudden weight on the side of the bed, and it would be Uncle Humph, stinking of brandy and cigars and saying he wanted a good night kiss. And then one time he said, "Do you know what a party kiss is?" And before I could reply, he rammed his tongue into my mouth and thrust it around like a live fish. I wish I had bitten it off. Every summer he did it till I was about 16. Oh, it wasn't as bad as for some, I know, but maybe that's what made me frigid. That's what made me frigid. So that is the textual evidence of reading Suzanne McLeod's character, which is getting support. Now, the novel doesn't speak about child abuse, and because of that, a behavioral pattern that changes. And we are not in the memory of Suzanne, so we don't get any connection whether this is there. This is only what Paul has heard, and Paul is telling us. So we have to do lots of creative reading between the spaces to build up other characters and see that, well, this might be the reason. Now, this neither the Paul might understand, nor Martha or Clara might understand, nor Gordon would understand. So to understand Suzanne's character becomes very difficult for everybody that is around Suzanne, and also for readers also. For readers also it is becoming very challenging. But the same was the story even in Sense of an Ending in case of Veronica's character. And then again it is very silent. There is just a passing remark. There is nothing else that is coming there. But again there was this point of breakup because Veronica is not ready to have a physical relation with the friend. And that is the reason that perhaps, why that? Because some kind of stigma in the mind which is playing a vital role. You are not, I insist, and with a bit of luck, the old bastard will be in very hot place if there is any justice. So that person कोई कर्मनो सिद्धांत काम करे तो ये क्या नरकमा सड़कतो हશે, very hot place. That's what Paul tries to say. क्या हरामी व्यक्ति नरकमा सड़गવો જોઈએ. He might be burning. We are coming to that point whether Julian Barnes is interested in giving that mythical justice. These are mythical justice system that it says. If there is any justice, there isn't, she replied. There isn't any justice here or anywhere else. Suzanne is telling you. And the afterlife would just be an enormous bridge party. Bridge is the game of cards. Cards ni ramat nu naam છે, bridge. Bridge party with Uncle Humph bidding 6 no trumps and winning every hand and claiming a party kiss at his as his reward. I am sure you are expert. Teasingly, he tells this. But the thing is, Casey Paul, as used to call him, it would be dreadful, entirely dreadful, if in some way that man was still alive. And what you don't wish for your enemies, you would hardly expect for yourself also. So this is that episode which helps us get into this character and also study. But it is passing off. This kind of passing remarks are very difficult to capture in the narration, and so it becomes a bit tough to comprehend everything and all the characters and their behavioral patterns in this narration that it happened. So this is this character. Okay, so characters summary is clear by and large. General, there are lots of minor things that happen, but what is important for us to study. Timeline also we have seen with the jumps in the narration that we have done. This still remains to be seen. So tomorrow we will see this, that how this narrative pattern is changing and what may be the reason, what interpretation we can give to this changing narrative pattern so far as our thematic concern is concerned. And we will see some of the thematic things, especially love, how the love is seen and how memory is playing a vital role in that. That we will see tomorrow. Okay. Okay, we end our class here. In case any questions, then you can ask if you have any questions or any observations here. Okay, so then let us end the class.